Okay, so the basics for rolling out this Roman thin crust pizza are here. You need a rolling pin. And this is something that you'll never see happen in Naples. The kinds of pizza they make there is always hand stretched because they want that airy dough, that bubbly crust, a thicker style of crust. And what we're looking for here is a very, very thin crust. We also need some bench flour, and regardless of what kind of pizza you're making, you always need some bench flour. And bench flour is just a fancy word for the extra flour you use to put on top of the tabletop surface. If you have a marble tabletop, awesome. It's the best kind of surface to use for rolling out pizza. But if you don't, just make sure you have a dry, clean surface, whether it's a wooden butcher block or a stainless steel table. And then you have your dough, which we were talking about, has doubled in size almost, and takes about 24 hours in the refrigerator to get to this stage because the refrigerator slows down the proofing time. If you were doing it at room temperature, it would take about 3 hours to get to this stage. But in the refrigerator, I'd say about 24 hours. And it's important that the rolling pin that you select is a flat rolling pin, not a tapered rolling pin, so that you get a nice, even, flat crust. So the first thing we need to do before we turn our pizza doughs out is we want to flour the bench. So we do that with a sprinkling motion. And the reason why you want to do it this way, as opposed to putting flour down and moving it around with your hands, is when you move flour around with your hands, you end up with lots of blank spots, right? So the best way that any baker or any pizza person can make a nice evenly floured bench is by sprinkling and throwing as opposed to spreading out with your hands. A nice even spread. And then we're going to take our scraper and just shimmy it underneath very gently and then turn it out the other way. And the reason I've turned it out the other way is so that I can get some flour on the other side so that both sides are well floured so we can begin rolling them out. So I like to think about the rolling process as a two-stage process. We're going to roll them out until they're halfway where they need to be, and then let them rest again because there's a lot of elasticity in this pizza dough. We've developed a lot of gluten from that time that we've worked it, either the 20 minutes of kneading or the 10 minutes of machine. Whatever you chose, you've added a lot of elasticity to this dough, so you need to make sure that you're not you're going to be working too hard if you don't do this two-stage process. So first by hand, I'm just going to pat it down flat. And then using the rolling pin, I'm going to work from the center out. So from the center outwards this way, from the center down towards me, and then likewise to the sides. And then after each go round of that 4 directions, front, back, side, side, I'm going to lift the dough up and make sure that it's not sticking. And you'll see I'll repeat that process. Front, back, side, side. And you want to apply a decent amount of pressure, but always making sure that you're going from the center out because you don't want to roll over the same part twice because then all you're doing is encouraging that elasticity to come back to the center. So front, back, side, side with good pressure. And then at that point, we're going to set this aside and let it rest for a second. And at this point of the process, this first stage, it's not so important what size it gets worked out to. You just want to work it out to roughly halfway to where it needs to be. Because all that you're doing here is starting the initial flattening out process and letting it relax. Once we go into the second stage, then I'm going to show you exactly the size that we're looking for. And you'll see if you get up close here that there are some air bubbles that are forming up here. And if you were making a Neapolitan style dough, having air pockets like that is desirable, and so you kind of want to keep those. And so you would hand stretch it, and very gently so that you have all that air in there. But for us, and for the kind of pizza that we're making today, this Roman style pizza, we're actually trying to knock that air out. And a lot of people would say, oh, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. But who's going to tell a Roman pizzaiolo that he shouldn't be doing it that way? They've been doing it that way for 100 years, and I think it's pretty delicious. So this is stage 1 of the rolling process, and as you can see, they're not perfectly round, nor will they be perfectly round when I'm finished with them because I'm not the perfect pizzaiolo, and that doesn't bother me at all. But they are going to be delicious no matter what shape they are. But the size does matter because we want to get the thickness right, and so if we get it to 12 inches, we know the thickness is going to be just right for this particular crust. So we have right here a 12-inch pizza plate, and we can see that it hasn't come all the way out there. It's maybe about 3/4 of the way there, but doesn't quite fit. And what we want to end up with is a pizza dough that comes all the way out to the edges of these and even just a little bit past, because when it cooks, it's going to retract just a touch. So stage one of the rolling is complete. The doughs have been resting for just about 3 to 5 minutes, not too long. And then we're going to flour our bench again, and we're going to finish these off and get them to that perfect 11 to 12 inch size that we're looking for. So we floured the bottom of the bench, we're flouring the top of the pizza crust as well. Same process, just a little bit more aggressive with the pressure now. And then with just a few rolls like that, we should be just about the right size. And what we'll do is we'll take this pizza plate just to be sure, and we see that it's just coming out beyond the edge of the pizza plate, and that means that we're going to be perfect because it's going to retract just a little bit once it goes into the oven. And then when you're transferring your dough, always be sure to use the backs of your hands and not the tips of your fingers. Because if you use the tips of your fingers, you're going to pierce right through the pizza dough. So when you're moving the dough around, lift it up gently and use the backs of your hands.